Alright, it was obvious the Blazers' defensive game plan was to have their bigs play off of Dre's body, because Klingon was babysitting the paint, and all that did was give the Dubs a lot of space to exploit, so that was their main advantage in the first half. I like that Dre was looking to score, because there's been times where he's been hesitant when his defenders clearly disrespecting him, and more importantly, he was still mixing in his patented DHOs up top for the 2-on-1, so Steph was coming off wide open, because Klingon was basically in a mega drop. Even some of the others were getting the same looks, because his coverage was the same against the entire team, and I think there were only a couple times where he showed against Steph, but all that did was open up the swing, so that didn't work either. If they weren't just generating good looks from deep off screens or in the scramble, then they were doing it in transition by pushing the rock, and their pace was their second advantage, because that was also leading to whistles, so they were getting a lot of those in the second. The only issue they were having was their finishing, either at the rim or on their open floats, so at least they had their 3-ball going, because that allowed them to match the Blazers' shot making on the other end, and them also having their 3-ball going. They were generating them in a variety of ways, from a kick out off a no board, to a spray on a paint touch, or off the Dubs breakdowns, so there were some advantages for them to exploit, and once again, it all goes back to the Dubs' personnel issues. First, there were too many gambles or late switches. Then second, there were too many instances where Pods didn't know where his man was. Then third, the Dubs were having Steph switch instead of the usual hedges, so Avdija was hunting him all night. And even when the Blazers weren't just hunting a mismatch in the half court, they were still finding a cross match in transition, so they were able to constantly get a favorable matchup. I think that's what forced the Dubs to mix in their zone at times, because as I've said many times before, the Dubs really struggle to contain the rock, and it all goes back to their personnel issues, so no matter who was in front of Shaden, he was frying him off the dribble. It didn't matter if he got a screen or not, he was getting to his spots, and even Jeremy was frying, but he was doing it primarily as a spot up, because he could not miss from deep, so whenever he caught the rock, he didn't hesitate to pull, especially in the fourth. I knew he was feeling good when I saw him shoot 3 to 4 no dips throughout the night, and they were able to continue exploiting mismatches or cross matches in that quarter, so when Avdija came in, they just played through him, because if he wasn't just exploiting that, then he was exploiting the Dubs bigs blitzing in his SNRs for the backside advantage. That's what forced the Dubs to go small, but unfortunately for them, it's always difficult to get stops with small ball, so that didn't work. And fortunately for the Blazers, their win was really from Steph having a bad stretch in the final minute, because prior to that, their adjustment in the second half did not work at all. They were trying to contain Steph as much as possible, especially off screens, but by the time they made the adjustment, it was just a little too late, because for some reason, teams still think adjusting after Steph gets some clean looks is gonna work, and it never does. Per usual, all he needed was 1 or 2 to go on a ridiculous heater, so the Dubs were looking for him more in the second half, and when he had even a sliver of daylight, he was quick to get his. Then when he was getting defenders to overcommit, he was still getting them on a flyby, or just generating easy looks for the others, either on a simple dime or on the backside. He was basically creating an advantage no matter what the Blazers tried to do, so it was turning into a vintage Steph performance, and it was just an unfortunate sequence of events that ruined that for him. After a crazy pullover too, he made up for it with a steal, and it was smart of him to attack quick, because the Blazers' defense wasn't set, so he was able to beat them to the spot, but he just ended up blowing a tire. I think he took off just a little too far out, because he only took 1 dribble inside the arc, and he did a ball fake to the strong corner, so when he took off, he probably didn't have the lift to finish the lay and left it short even with a full extension. That was worse than his turnover later, because that was an easy opportunity to take the lead back, and they would have just needed 1 stop, instead of having to foul on the next possession. But what makes that miss even more unfortunate is the fact he would have had a 50 ball and potentially a win to top it off. Just watch the tape.